Okay, so welcome to our third part of the Science of Biology lecture. So in parts 1 and 2, we were talking about how do we know something's alive, how do we organize it, kind of categorize it. The scientific method, definitely something I want you guys to be comfortable with. Make sure you understand how that process works. As a biologist, that's essential. It'll save you so much headache, so many frustrations in all of your science courses, chemistry, physics, all your biology courses, etc., if you understand that basic process. And again, we do it daily. It's just understanding the formal stepwise process, the different elements of the scientific method. So when we do the scientific method and we find data that supports our hypothesis and all those facts come together and we eventually reach the theory point, we have something that is very, very valid, very substantial. It is grounded in fact. It is not a guess. It's not an idea. Oh, I think it is fact-based information, evidence-based information. So when people say, oh, that theory, climate change, it's a theory, it's just a guess. No, it's not. One of the one of the probably most critical theories for you guys to understand as a biologist is the theory of evolution. All life works off of the theory of evolution. Evolution is a change in organisms over generations. It is not an individual. Individuals do not evolve. Write that down somewhere. Tattoo it. Individuals do not evolve. Populations evolve over time, over generations. Now, and we'll have a whole unit on this. So we're going to come back and hammer this out, and I want to make sure you guys understand it and you're comfortable with it, and what are the lines of evidence and the facts behind evolution. Evolution is a scientific concept. It does not negate a faith-based belief in something, because faith doesn't have to have evidence for it. You believe it. That's fantastic. Science doesn't negate faith. Faith doesn't negate and say science doesn't count. They're two different perspectives, two different topics, two different ideas. They can coexist together without a doubt. All right. So evolution, though, is really formulated from Charles Darwin's concepts and ideas. He was not the first, he's not the last, but he's the one who gets most of the credit. And again, we'll get into this in more detail when we get to the unit on evolution. But Darwin proposed natural selection as a mechanism of evolution. How does natural selection cause populations to evolve over generations? Well, for natural selection to work, there are 4 critical components to it. All right, you have to have variation within your population. Different varieties, different sizes, shapes, types, weights, heights, colors, etc. If your population is all the same, they're all clones, it's not going to evolve. It's not going to go through natural selection. So we need variation in the population. More individuals are born than can survive. So what does this do? This creates competition. You have 10 birds. There's only enough food for 6. You now start to fight. When you're fighting, when you're competing, certain individuals have adaptable traits. This beak shape gives me the ability to find food. You don't have it? You're going to starve to death and you're going to die. So there's something about me that makes me more adaptable, that allows me to survive, because I have a special variation that you don't have. And if I survive, I have the better opportunity to pass on an adaptable trait. So those adaptable traits, my special beak, those traits will increase in the population because I'm alive, I will reproduce, I'll pass it on to my kids will be adaptable, they will pass it on to my grandkids, they will be adaptable, and those traits continue to increase in the population. This causes the population to change over generations. My great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren's generation, everybody's got this popular beak because it enables them to survive. Those who didn't have that beak, they didn't survive. Now, as the environment changes, well then, what was adaptable for many generations may not be adaptable anymore. And certain individuals that have a different variation will be able to be more competitive and have a better chance of survival. And this trend will continue over and over and over as long as life exists. It will go through natural selection and populations will evolve over time. Now, what lines of evidence do we use to support evolution? There's a whole big laundry list out there. Darwin had some of these available when he was presenting his ideas, and the list continues to grow. But we can start easily enough with the fossil record. That supports evolution. Explain the fossil record without natural selection and evolution. Can't do it. Genetics. Why do you have the DNA you have? Because it was in your ancestors, and your great-great ancestors, and great-great-great. And what DNA will your children inherit? Genetics supports evolution. Anatomy. Explain to me why all mammals have the same basic bone structure in their arm. Look at the human arm. Humerus, radius, ulna, wrist bones, hand bones, fingers. Same bone pattern in cats and birds and porpoises and horses. There's variation between species based on the environment they've adapted to. It's the exact same bone pattern. Why would we all have this bone pattern? Because we have a common ancestor that was in mammal that bone pattern evolved in. So anatomy is another big line of evidence. And then molecular. Holy moly, the molecular biology field has exploded with lines of evidence. When we start looking at genes and DNA and sequencing and processing, all of that supports evolution. It's huge lines of evidence that continues to support evolution and the theory of evolution today. All right, so when we look at life and we look at science of biology, we're going to be running through some basic biological themes. We're going to talk about the cell theory. We're going to go into DNA and explore that and look at how that works. A big one, and let me find my red again. I will really hammer this into you guys when we get into pathways and metabolism and structure. Structure equals function. The shape of a protein determines the function of the protein. The shape of an animal's body determines what its ecological role is. Incredibly important concept to remember. Structure equals function. So if you change the structure, you then change the function. That can be detrimental. That can be beneficial. Just depends on what that function is that is no longer being performed. Is it a new function that's better? Or is it a function that needs to be performed and all of a sudden now it's not and it becomes a negative? Diversity. Why do we have the diversity of life on Earth? Is because of evolution. Natural selection evolution created the 1.8 million species we know of and the potential for how many more millions and millions of species out there. That's because of evolution. All living systems need energy, whether it starts at the solar, that solar level with sunlight, or we need it at a chemical level, bottom of the thermal vents in the ocean. But every system, every living thing needs energy in some form, some fashion. So we'll work through all these themes throughout the semester. But just kind of giving you guys hopefully a little preview for what we're doing during this semester. You move on to Bio 112, you get into a little bit of a different direction of biology, but this helps set the foundation for a lot of the stuff you guys will do in Bio 112. So now we got this 1.8 million species out there that we know of, and that number is a moving target. I'll warn you now, it's moving. We're finding new things. We're discovering new species. New species are evolving. So the number's going to keep changing. It's going to keep growing. Some estimations are 10 million or 10 million, 50 million. It's hard to know. But when we get these things and we have these species, we have to figure out a way to name them and give them an identity. And that is the Linnaean system of classification. Okay, so make sure you're good with this. Red underline and red stars. Yeah, let me get a third one in there. Okay, those are important things. Know the system. The broadest level of classification that has the largest diversity of things in it is the domain level. This is very general, very non-specific. As you move down to kingdom, it gets more rigid. Okay, you have to have certain criteria to be in this kingdom Animalia. If you don't have it, you're in different kingdoms. So what I want you guys to do is look up. Let me see if I can write this. Look up the features for the domain Eukarya, for the kingdom Animalia, for the phylum Chordata, and the class Mammalia. What are the physical characteristics necessary to be placed in those levels? Humans are in those levels. We are Eukarya, Animalia, Chordata, Mammalia. What criteria do we have that puts us in those levels? Classification would then go from domain to kingdom to phylum to class to order to family to genus and to species. Those are the most general levels of classification. Believe it or not, there are other levels in between. There's actually super kingdoms, super phylums. There's levels that fit in between here where these green lines are going. Classification to some extent is a hot mess. I want you guys to know the basics, and then as you move into 112, we'll talk about different ways of classifying, because depending on which methodology you use, it may change the actual classification of the organism. So, but for now, just make sure you're good with Linnaean classification system. All right, so again, big general picture, domain Eukarya. This is where plants fit, fungi fit, animals fit, and I'm just going to put a big question mark over these little goofy weird things called protistas. They actually are being pulled out and reorganized, and it's exciting, but it's frustrating, but that's the way science works. Biology is a moving field. There's always new stuff to learn. What I teach today, half to 2/3 didn't exist when I was in college. I didn't learn it by sitting in a classroom because it didn't exist. So what you're learning today is great. It's giving you a foundation, but you guys are the ones who will be discovering new scientific ideas over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And then maybe you'll be teaching it to a student 20 years from now saying, this is new. It didn't exist back in my day in college, especially in the molecular field. All right, so domain Eukaryas are one of our big domains. The other two domains are bacteria and archaea. And we'll touch a little bit on this stuff this semester. This is mostly Bio 112. The main thing I really want you guys to focus on this semester with classification is just the system. What is the order of Linnaean classification? And then key features for these 4 levels for mammals. Don't get too bogged down in the weeds with a lot of this. It's more of a Bio 112 topic. All right, so we got a basic idea of what life is, how it works, how science and biology will work. Once we're through this, we're then going to start going into a little bit of chemistry.